I'm just an ordinary American citizen. I'm not a prophet, nor am I a political analyst. But as I watch the increasingly visible upheaval in American society and politics, I can't help but wonder, are we witnessing a collapse from within? Nostradamus' prophecy about a Western empire torn apart by lies and fires of men's hearts suddenly echoes in my mind. Though he lived centuries ago, his words feel eerily relevant to what's happening in this country today. Cracks in the heart of America. As of April 11, 2025, America is facing a series of internal challenges. In new tariff policies, President Donald Trump's administration has imposed high tariffs on imports from Vietnam, China, Canada, and Mexico, triggering backlash from trade partners and raising fears of a full-blown trade war. The National Emergency Declaration. The decision to declare a national emergency to support tariff policies has sparked heated debate over the powers of the federal government and its intrusion into economic affairs. The erosion of public trust. Recent surveys show that public trust in the federal government is at a historic low, with many expressing frustration and doubt about the leadership of key institutions. Rising secessionist sentiment. Some states, especially those with strong traditions of independence like Texas and California, have seen a rise in movements calling for greater autonomy or even secession from the Union. The impact of AI and media. The rapid growth of artificial intelligence and social media platforms has accelerated the spread of misinformation, fueling social polarization and weakening faith in traditional sources of information. These aren't just isolated challenges. They're signs of a deeper fracture in the American fabric. Could this be the kind of internal collapse Nostradamus once predicted? Nostradamus' prophecy and its strange relevance today. In Les Prophéties, first published in 1555, French seer Michel de Nostradamus, better known as Nostradamus, left behind over 900 cryptic quatrains, filled with haunting predictions. One of them, in particular, has caught the attention of modern scholars in light of America's current state. The Western Empire shall be divided by lies and fires of men's hearts. Brother against brother, states break away. Trust shall collapse, and a new voice shall rise. Not human, but born of code and wire. If you're living in America in 2025, like I am, and you read this now, it might send a chill down your spine. Phrases like divided, states break away, trust shall collapse, and a voice not human are no longer just poetic. They're becoming part of our daily lives. I used to think prophecies like this were just metaphors, the kind of stuff made for Hollywood scripts. But now, watching the widening rift between blue and red states, seeing social media shaped and controlled by algorithms, and witnessing AI not just write news, but shape public opinion, I can't ignore it anymore. It's starting to look like Nostradamus saw something coming. Some scholars suggest fires of men's hearts is a metaphor for outrage, clearly reflected in massive protests, from Black Lives Matter to movements fighting for personal freedom in the post-pandemic era. And that voice born of code and wire, that's not hard to grasp, considering how in just 3 years ChatGPT, Gemini, and other AI systems have replaced traditional journalism and even formal education as go-to sources of information. Which brings me to a clearer version of the question I've been quietly asking myself. If this is the beginning of a collapse from within, are we even aware enough to see it? The journey begins. Looking for answers. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a historian or a social scientist. I'm just a regular American, served in the military, grew up in the Midwest, then moved to Oregon to work remote IT. But one thing I know, when a country begins to crack, the people feel it first. Not through the TV, but over breakfast, in rising bills, in whispered conversations at the gas station. The day I decided to begin this journey, I was sitting in a small cafe in Eugene, Oregon. A man in his 60s, wearing an old army jacket, glanced up at the price of a loaf of bread and turned to me. You know, he said, back in 2020 that cost $3. Now it's $6.50. And the scary part isn't the price. It's that no one even questions it anymore. His words sent a shiver down my spine. I started writing things down. Not because I wanted to write a book, but because I didn't want to lose my grip on reality in a society being torn in half by bias and disinformation. I decided to spend a month traveling across America, from Oregon to Texas, then through Louisiana, and up along the east to states like North Carolina and Pennsylvania. Meeting ordinary people and asking them one question: do you still believe in America the way you used to? I took a voice recorder, an old notebook, and the belief that amid all the noise, there were still pieces of truth that could show what's really happening in the American mind. This journey isn't about proving Nostradamus right or wrong. It's about answering a deeply American question. Are we still the United States, or just living in a name that no longer reflects the truth? From Oregon to Idaho, early signs of division? I left Eugene on a damp April morning, driving my old Ford Escape east along Highway 20. I'd taken this route many times before, but this time I wasn't just watching the road signs. I was watching for something else, a feeling. Right outside the city, you start seeing upside-down American flags. In the town of Burns, I stopped for coffee at a roadside station. The woman behind the counter asked me where I was coming from. When I said, Eugene, she raised an eyebrow and asked, "Are you a liberal?" The way he asked it, more like a warning than a genuine question, immediately brought Nostradamus's prophecy to mind, divided by lies and fires of men's hearts. When I crossed into Idaho, a state that's repeatedly pushed for incorporating eastern Oregon counties to escape Salem's progressive policies, the tension became even more palpable. In Boise, I spoke with a man named Kyle, a former soldier who now owns an auto repair shop. He didn't hold back. "We don't trust the federal government anymore," he said. "They don't understand people out here. We want our own laws, our own money, our own police. I don't want my kid learning that brainwashing crap in school anymore." I asked if he supported Idaho expanding its borders to include parts of Oregon. Kyle just smiled. "It's already happening. Maybe not officially, but people around here chose their side a long time ago." I left Boise with a heavy mind. On paper, America is still one nation. But in reality, community by community, state by state, there are Americans who no longer believe they belong to the rest of it. It's not a civil war in the traditional sense. No armies marching across state lines. It's more like an internal split, slow burning, spreading like wildfire beneath the surface. The shaky dollar. Is America's power unraveling? I used to think the dollar was untouchable, the symbol of stability and strength. Wars, recessions, political chaos. None of it could shake the greenback with the faces of US presidents that the world trusted. But over the past few years, I've started hearing things I once thought were reserved for fringe conspiracy forums. The dollar's being manipulated. They're printing money like crazy. The whole system's about to collapse. At first, I brushed it off as fear-mongering. But then 2024 happened. Inflation soared, the Federal Reserve kept hiking interest rates, and regional banks began crumbling under liquidity crises. Grocery prices spiked. A gallon of milk neared $6, a carton of eggs over $5. Meanwhile, my salary hadn't changed since 2022. In February 2025, an IMF report revealed that global transactions using the US dollar had declined. More countries were shifting to the yuan, the euro, even cryptocurrencies for trade. I interviewed a financial expert in Denver, Susan Gray, a former investment banker with 2 decades in the field. Her words still echo in my head. You don't need the dollar to crash in a day. All it takes is for people to start doubting it, and that's enough. I asked her, "Are we getting close to the breaking point?" She paused for a moment before replying, "We're not standing at the edge. We've already stepped over it. The only question is when people will realize it." And again, I thought of Nostradamus's prophecy, not just the part about fire, but also lies. Maybe this internal collapse won't come from bullets or bombs, but from a financial system built on increasingly fragile trust. Media and AI. The invisible manipulators? I used to believe America's divide was about political parties. But after miles of travel, dozens of interviews, and hours of reviewing news coverage, I've realized there's something even more powerful than politics. Information. And the thing controlling that information is not people anymore. In 2023, an MIT report showed that over 70% of Americans now get their news primarily from social media, platforms where algorithms, not editors, decide what you see. Not journalists, not producers, just lines of code. Artificial intelligence, built to keep you glued to your screen by any means necessary. Anger, fear, doubt. I spoke to a former engineer at a major tech company in San Francisco. He asked to remain anonymous. His words gave me chills. We didn't build AI to serve the truth. We built it to optimize attention. Meanwhile, false information has been spreading like wildfire across U.S. states, especially during sensitive events like protests, elections, even hurricanes. Voice cloning, fake videos, AI-generated images. Any politician can now be made to say anything. Nostradamus wrote, "Lies and fires of men's hearts will tear the Western Empire apart." Maybe that fire isn't just riots in the streets. Maybe it's the fire that burns trust, fueled by tweets, deepfakes, and headlines designed to provoke, not inform. One man I met at a town hall in Idaho said, "I don't trust anyone anymore. Not CNN, not Fox, not even my kid's teacher. I only believe what I see online." And that, to me, is the most chilling sign of all. When people lose trust in everything, anyone who shouts loud enough, true or false, can become their leader. States demanding autonomy. Is America breaking apart piece by piece? I was sitting in a small cafe in Austin, Texas, when an older man wearing a jacket with a Texas Republic flag turned to me and asked, "Which state are you from?" "Around here, we're thinking about going back to the old days of independence." At first, I thought he was joking, but soon, I realized he wasn't alone. Since 2022, Texas has seen a surge in the Texit movement, modeled after Brexit, calling for the state to secede from the Union. A petition with over 100,000 signatures was submitted to the state legislature. Groups like the Texas Nationalist Movement gained traction online, rallying behind slogans like "Texas First," "Washington Second," and "Texas isn't the only one." In California, the Calexit movement, aiming to break away and form an independent nation with what would be the fifth largest economy in the world, also began gaining attention, once considered far-fetched. But now, viral videos about tax discontent, immigration disputes, and LGBTQ+ controversies have reignited the call for self-determination. Montana, Idaho, Oregon, conservative groups across this region are also speaking out, demanding to break away from a corrupt federal system. Some even propose merging together to form a new Greater Idaho, separating themselves from the liberal values of the coastal states. A 2024 report from the Pew Research Center revealed that nearly 36% of Americans believe states should be allowed to decide whether to remain in or leave the Union if they disagree with the federal government. To me, that sounds like a warning. No longer the United States, but the divided states of America. A National Guard reservist I interviewed in Georgia put it bluntly, "We train to fight enemies abroad. But now, I worry the next battle will start right here at home." The divide is no longer just in Congress. It has seeped into dinner tables, church gatherings, and Facebook group chats. If faith in a shared nation crumbles, then the map of the United States in the future may no longer look like the one we know today. The falling dollar. Is a financial nightmare looming? I was standing in a grocery store on the outskirts of St. Louis, Missouri, holding a carton of eggs. Price: $6.49, double what I used to pay just 3 years ago. And while I'd grown somewhat used to post-COVID inflation, something about this year feels different. And I'm not the only one who noticed. In the first quarter of 2025, the US dollar index, DXY, which measures the dollar's strength against a basket of foreign currencies, fell below 90, its lowest level since 2018. Experts warn that this isn't just a normal economic cycle, but a sign of waning confidence in the US government's ability to maintain stability. Inflation is no longer just numbers on a chart. It's middle-class families switching from supermarkets to discount stores, college students choosing between textbooks or gas, retirees skipping meals to afford electricity. Countries like China, Russia, and Iran are openly pushing for bilateral trade in their own currencies instead of the dollar. A group known as BRICS+, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and several others, is discussing launching a digital currency to replace the US dollar in international trade. I spoke with a former banker in Chicago, now an independent analyst. He said, "Americans think the dollar is forever, but its value is built on trust. If that trust is shaken by debt, political instability, or fractures in the federal system, anything can fall." Indeed, as of early April 2025, the U.S. national debt had surpassed $35.5 trillion, a record high. Interest rates remain elevated, inflation lingers, and the stock market continues to seesaw. An article in the Wall Street Journal put it grimly: "The US dollar doesn't die overnight. It bleeds slowly, 1 percentage point, one shuttered store, one lost belief at a time." For an economy that was once the world's benchmark, this isn't just a currency crisis. It's a question. Can the American dream still be priced in dollars? The armed secession movement. Disturbing signs from within. I used to think secession was just history, like the Civil War in 1861. But now, in online forums, town halls in Idaho, Texas, even New Hampshire, the word secession is making a comeback as a rallying cry for the modern age. And it's not a joke. In March 2025, a group called the Lone Star Sovereignty Movement in Texas released a formal declaration demanding full authority over law, borders, currency, and natural resources, warning that if the federal government fails to comply, they will hold a statewide secession referendum in early 2026. What's troubling is that groups like this aren't stopping at words. At a ranch in northern Arizona, I met Jason, a veteran who served in Afghanistan, now leading a local militia. When I asked why they were conducting armed drills, his response chilled me. "We don't want a war, but if the federal government keeps ignoring us, we'll be ready. It's our constitutional right." According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, as of March 2025, the number of organized militia groups in the U.S. had increased by nearly 40% compared to 2023. Many no longer hide. They live stream firearms training, hold citizens' trials against local officials, and circulate literature calling to restore the original Constitution. The issue isn't just the weapons. It's the mindset, one of unraveling. When I asked a woman at a citizen gathering in Montana why she wanted her state to break away, she replied, "I don't trust Washington, D.C. anymore. I don't even know who's really running this country. AI? Billionaires? People who've never even set foot where I live." What's even scarier is the growing sympathy for these extreme views. According to a Pew Research survey from February 2025, 23% of Americans surveyed said states should have the right to secede if the federal government no longer represents their interests. I left that militia meeting in silence. Part of me was angry, the other part worried, because this is no longer a fringe group in tinfoil hats talking conspiracy. These are millions of Americans who feel abandoned and are looking for a way out, whether through ballots or bullets. AI and media manipulation. Invisible weapons tearing a nation apart. I once believed artificial intelligence would push humanity forward, automation, medicine, education. But stepping into 2025, I'm beginning to see another side of AI. A darker side. Not rogue robots, not Skynet, but AI that manipulates perception, shapes belief, spreads division, one news feed at a time. In January, a report from the Brookings Institution revealed that AI algorithms operated by major social media platforms have, accidentally or deliberately, created extreme echo chambers. Machine learning models are designed to maximize engagement. The result? Sensational, polarizing, and outrage-inducing content gets pushed to the top. And it's not just social media anymore. AI is now being used to create deepfakes with startling precision. I watched a video of a presidential speech declaring martial law in several southern states. The voice, facial expressions, even the backdrop were so convincing that many believed it was real. When I met Dr. Hannah Clark, a technology expert at Stanford University, she warned, AI isn't just aggregating information anymore. It's shaping public psychology. It knows who's most vulnerable to emotional triggers, and it targets them. Combined with a hyperpartisan media landscape, left versus right, this has made truth a relative concept. Americans no longer debate policies. They debate reality. What's real? What's fake? No one's sure anymore. During a visit to Ohio, I attended a local town hall titled, "The Media is the New Battleground." A participant, an ex-high school teacher, stood up and asked, "How am I supposed to know what's real anymore? Both sides have videos, experts, and so-called evidence. I'm confused, but it's more than confusion. It's a breakdown of trust." Internal reports from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, show that in the first 3 months of 2025, the number of major disinformation incidents doubled compared to the same period in 2024. Small protests escalated into riots. Misinformation responses triggered community-level conflicts. Behind the scenes, rival nations, according to FBI and NSA briefings, are ramping up AI-driven cognitive warfare campaigns, especially targeting politically or racially tense states. And when I glance at my phone, the same place where millions of Americans get their news every day, I feel a shiver of fear, because I'm no longer sure whether I'm reading real news or a finely tuned AI script designed to provoke outrage, confusion, and turn me against my neighbors. When trust collapses, the impact on American streets and minds. I'm standing in downtown Portland, Oregon, a city once known for indie coffee shops, street art, and a fierce sense of freedom. But what I saw earlier this year were boarded-up windows, shuttered storefronts, and the distant wail of police sirens. This wasn't after a hurricane, not a natural disaster. This was the fallout of broken trust. In the South Waterfront District, I met Marcus, a pizza shop owner who used to be packed every night. Now, he only opens 3 days a week. Why? Business is down almost 60%. People don't trust anything anymore. Not the government, not the media, not the banks. They're hoarding cash, buying guns, and staying home. I asked what he thought about the prophecies of Nostradamus. Marcus shrugged. I don't really believe in that stuff, but he might have been right, at least about the fire rising from within the people. And he's not alone. According to a Pew Research Center survey released in late March 2025, only 27% of Americans believe the federal government acts in the public's interest, the lowest level in over 60 years. Even more concerning, nearly 40% said they believe a breakup between states is likely within the next decade. I visited a community meeting in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. A group of veterans, teachers, and small business owners weren't discussing inflation or unemployment. They were talking about drafting a new local constitution. Some even floated the idea of restoring Texas financial sovereignty, a coded phrase for soft secession. One older man stood up and said, "We don't speak the same language anymore. Not English, I mean values, morals, beliefs. I don't feel like me and New York are part of the same country." Once, that kind of talk would have sounded extreme. Now, it echoes across small towns, rural southern counties, and online forums where Americans are retreating into their own communities. What worries me the most? It's the younger generation born after September 11th, raised on social media, now coming of age in the rubble of collective trust. I spoke with Lily, a senior psychology student at UC Berkeley. She told me, "I don't know who to believe anymore. The news is full of contradictions. AI writes articles that sound completely human. I just feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and like I can't trust anyone. If collapse is happening, it's not the sound of bombs or the fall of Congress. It's quieter. It starts in the mind, in the heart, and it spreads like a virus. The states that want out, the modern secessionist movement. If you thought the idea of a U.S. state declaring independence was impossible, you probably haven't been paying close attention in recent years. I drove along Interstate 5, crossing the border between Oregon and California, where a hand-painted sign with 3 white letters stood out. State of Jefferson. It wasn't a joke. It was a declaration. The state of Jefferson is the name of a secessionist movement that's been around since the 1940s. But in the past few years, it's been reignited, this time by real discontent. Residents in rural Northern California and Southern Oregon say they've been forgotten by state governments, suffocated by urban-centered policies, and shut out of meaningful political decisions. I met Bill Rogers, 63, a cattle rancher in Siskiyou County. He's flown the Jefferson flag from his front porch for the past 5 years. "I'm not against America," Bill said. "I'm against the fact that America no longer belongs to people like us. They make laws in Sacramento, but they've never set foot on this land." And Bill isn't alone. In 2023, a petition to move 17 counties from Oregon into Idaho, part of the Greater Idaho movement, was introduced to several local councils. By 2025, it's no longer just a slogan. More than 10 counties have officially voted in favor of leaving Oregon. I called Dr. Melanie Crouch, a political science professor at the University of Utah who has been tracking administrative secession trends across the U.S. for the past decade. "This isn't about isolated disagreement anymore," she told me. "What we're witnessing is structural division. People no longer trust that state or federal governments represent them. And in the 21st century, where online platforms can create completely separate information ecosystems, these communities are becoming culturally and ideologically disconnected." From Texas, where Governor Greg Abbott has repeatedly spoken about state sovereignty, to New Hampshire, where the NH Exit Group is pushing to leave the Union, America is experiencing a resurgence of the independent spirit. But this time, it's not about forming a new nation. It's about pulling away from one they no longer feel represents them. The question is, if more and more states stop recognizing central authority, can the United States truly remain united? Weakening economy, the dollar and the global trust crisis. I remember when my father used to stash dollar bills in a metal box under the bed. To him, US dollars were as safe as gold. But now that trust is starting to crumble, and not just in rural towns. At a coffee shop in St. Louis, I spoke with the owner, Valerie, a former banker, who told me the cost of green coffee beans from Colombia had jumped nearly 40% in just the past year. She sighed. "Inflation isn't just some theory anymore. It's right there, in every cappuccino my customers drink every morning." According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, in March 2025 rose 6.2% year-over-year, the highest since 2022. But that number doesn't tell the whole story. What's more worrying is the weakening of the dollar in global markets. One of the clearest signs is the rise of international trade in yuan, euros, and especially government-issued digital currencies, CBDCs. Many countries have begun shifting their foreign reserves, reducing their dollar holdings in favor of a mixed currency basket. I interviewed Dr. Alan Green, an economist in Washington, D.C. who formerly worked at the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Confidence in the dollar used to be the cornerstone of the global financial system. But with America gripped by internal instability, political polarization, and national debt reaching $34.5 trillion at the start of 2025, countries are beginning to ask, why should we keep betting on a system that seems to be cracking from within? On Wall Street, major investment funds are shifting capital toward Asian markets. Meanwhile, among America's middle class, people are buying gold, silver, and even Bitcoin as a form of personal financial defense. I spoke with Marlene, a 38-year-old medical technician in Denver. "I don't fully understand macroeconomics, but I know $200 doesn't go as far as it did last year. And I know I can't count on Washington to protect my savings." The dollar's decline isn't just a technical issue. It's a symbol of eroding institutional trust, a measure of how Americans and the world see the future of the United States. And if Nostradamus was right, the Western Empire won't collapse due to a foreign enemy, but from rot within, starting in our wallets and our trust. The armed secession movement. Small sparks, smoldering quietly. Last month, I drove north on I-5, leaving Sacramento and heading toward the Oregon border. In a small town near the state line where the California and U.S. flags still fluttered in front of City Hall, I spotted another flag waving quietly by the roadside. Dark blue background, a white star in the center, and the words, "State of Jefferson." first, I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was the banner of a real movement, locals who want to break away from California and form a new state where they believe their voices will finally be heard. "We're not against America," a middle-aged man told me, resting his AR-15 rifle on a wooden table behind which sat a makeshift training camp. "We just want to break free from Sacramento and DC. We want to take care of ourselves." The Jefferson movement is just one example. From Texas, where some citizen groups advocate for independence, to Idaho and conservative areas of Montana, secessionist efforts, often under the form of unregulated armed militias, are becoming a growing societal force the mainstream media can no longer ignore. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, more than 560 militia groups were actively operating across the U.S. in 2024, a 20% increase in just 2 years. Not all are armed or calling for rebellion, but many have publicly stated that if the federal government no longer represents the people, then resistance is justified. This isn't a civil war in the traditional sense. No formal armies, no defined battle lines. This is a slow disintegration of trust, now armed and quietly organized. Dr. Miranda Harris, a Homeland Security expert at Georgetown University, told me, "We shouldn't wait for gunfire at the Capitol to call it a crisis. Internal collapse doesn't always come with a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it's a gradual fracture, like a bridge rusting away year after year." I've met ordinary people, teachers, welders, farmers, who don't seem extreme at all. But when you ask them if they trust the government, their eyes go quiet. And when you ask what they do if forced to give up their firearms, their answers are no longer vague. "We don't want violence," a woman in Texas told me. "But if we're pushed to the edge, we won't bow down." And that's what worries me the most. Technology, AI, and media. The phantom of internal manipulation. I used to think I was immune to fake news. As a former freelance journalist, I was trained to fact-check sources, analyze text, detect bias and manipulation. But I've come to realize even I sometimes doubt the very things I believe are true. It all started with a post on X, formerly Twitter, featuring a video of a political candidate standing before the American flag, making inflammatory remarks about immigrants. The post went viral, shared millions of times, with hashtags full of outrage. But when I looked into it, the video turned out to be an AI-generated deepfake. The voice, the expressions, even the blinking, completely synthesized by an algorithm. And that's just one of thousands of examples. Reports from the Brookings Institution revealed that as of early 2025, over 38% of viral political content on U.S. social media had been created or altered by AI. 1 in 3 users couldn't tell real from fake, and nearly half didn't bother to verify anything at all. This creates a silent storm. When you no longer know what's real, you begin to doubt everything. In that environment, trust in government, media, and even your neighbors collapses like dominoes. I spoke with an engineer who used to work for an AI development firm in San Francisco. He asked to remain anonymous but shared this. "We developed a model that can generate dozens of articles in the writing style of famous journalists. In seconds. No watermark. No signs for readers to detect. It's indistinguishably real." A chill ran down my spine. If tools like these fall into the hands of actors who want to divide America from within, this isn't speculation. It's the battlefield. And the ammunition is warped belief and amplified outrage. Even state governments are catching on. Texas and Florida passed new laws in 2025 requiring AI-generated content to be labeled, but who's really enforcing that? When a phone can now create a fake presidential speech, we're living in an era where trust is the most manipulable form of currency. In small cafes across Ohio, I overheard whispers that the next election won't be legitimate. Not because of hacked ballots, but because voters' minds have already been programmed long before they walk into the booth. Nostradamus may not have used the term AI, but when he wrote about an invisible force reshaping the will of mankind, I couldn't help but shudder. Democracy on the brink. From debate to extreme polarization. I still remember the last time my brother and I argued about politics without it turning into a shouting match. That was about 4 years ago. We used to disagree, sure, but we still respected each other. Now, just mentioning the federal government or immigration, and he storms off from dinner, slamming the door. And it's not just my story. A Pew Research survey published in March 2025 found that 64% of Americans say they can't speak their true political opinions within their own families. Nearly 1 in 3 believe that if things keep going this way, a civil war within the next 10 years is inevitable. I'm starting to realize that we're no longer living in a democracy where people respectfully disagree. We're in a place where differing opinions are labeled treasonous, and where debate has morphed into a form of threat, especially online. I once traveled to Idaho to film a state rights rally. Protesters held signs reading, "Freedom for Idaho. The feds don't represent us." These weren't just disgruntled citizens. They were organized, armed, prepared. More importantly, they believed democracy had betrayed them. One woman in her 50s, waving the state flag, told me, "I used to believe in Congress, but now they don't listen to people like me anymore. They only serve big corporations and artificial intelligence. We need a government that actually represents people, not algorithms." It may sound extreme, but the truth is, democracy is faltering not because of a lack of ballots, but because of a lack of trust. When people believe the system is rigged, that every election is just theater, then no result, no matter how fair, will matter. One alarming trend is the armed evolution of these secessionist movements. The FBI confirms at least 11 independent armed groups are operating in mountain and Midwestern states, explicitly preparing to resist federal authority if necessary. What's more concerning? These groups are recruiting veterans, retired law enforcement, and disillusioned tech workers. They're not carrying weapons to cause chaos. They believe they're defending the true Constitution, while the government, in their view, has strayed from America's founding values. American democracy, once a beacon to the world, now flickers like a lighthouse in the fog. Not because there's no light, but because too many artificial lights are flashing all at once, each misleading the eye in a different direction. Nostradamus may not have named it outright, but the line, "A fire from the people will burn the throne," echoes in my mind like a warning. Economic fallout, the dollar, crisis, and uncertainty. I'm used to political debates flooding my social media, but there's one thing that worries me even more: the numbers on my family's grocery bill. Numbers don't lie. At the Walmart near my home in Kentucky, the price of eggs has gone up over 40% in just 1 year. A gallon of milk that once cost under $3 now sometimes hits $5. Electricity, gas, and fuel prices too. Everything's climbing, and I keep asking myself, my paycheck hasn't changed, so why does life keep getting more expensive? In February 2025, the Federal Reserve announced that the average inflation rate had climbed back to 5.7%, more than double their 2% target. Meanwhile, the US dollar is losing value on the global stage, not due to any one crisis, but because of growing domestic instability. A Bloomberg report from March 2025 reads, "International investors are reducing their USD reserves, shifting toward gold and the euro due to concerns over political division and potential risks in the US over the coming year." I used to believe the US dollar was an unshakable fortress, but now it feels more like a sandcastle, beautiful, strong-looking, but quick to collapse if the waves rise high enough. And those waves are rising, from crises of trust to legislative gridlock. A local shop owner in Montana told me, "The government can't stop fighting over the budget. People are stockpiling goods." I used to think things like this only happened in far-off countries. Now it's happening here, in the middle of America. At the same time, red and blue states are taking more independent economic steps than ever before. Some southern states have proposed intrastate digital currency systems to enhance autonomy amid federal instability. I used to laugh at the phrase financial secession. Now it's showing up in state legislature meetings with bills written and debated in public. No one's coming out and officially saying America is falling apart. But look at the consumer indices, the pulled investments, and the local shops closing down because they can't afford the rent, and you'll see something's cracking. Quietly, without fireworks, but deep enough for anyone paying attention to feel uneasy. Nostradamus once wrote about gold becoming worthless in the hands of the wealthy. I don't know if he meant the US dollar, but I do know this: if money loses its value, society loses its trust. Ignored warnings. When history whispers before it screams. Back in high school, my history teacher said something I'll never forget. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does whisper. And if you ignore it long enough, it starts to scream. That line echoed in my head as I sat in a public library in Des Moines, Iowa, reading about the Great Depression of 1929 and the U.S. Civil War of 1861. The warning signs: discontent, division, loss of faith in federal government, all eerily mirror what we're seeing today. Experts have been warning us for years. In 2022, the RAND Corporation published a chilling study titled "The Risk of Federal Fragmentation: A 2030 Outlook." The report made it clear: if issues of trust, inequality, and political polarization continue, the U.S. could face a soft breakup, where states begin to enact their own laws, stop recognizing federal authority, without formally declaring secession. And yet, most people didn't pay attention. No one wants to imagine that kind of future for this country. I interviewed a retired military officer in Texas, Mike R., who had served in the Middle East. He told me, "We were trained to deal with terrorists overseas. But now, I see the same warning signs here at home: armed militias, autonomous zones claiming they don't recognize the federal government. And the worst part is, people treat it like it's normal." Over the past few years, warning signs have piled up. States like Texas, Florida, and South Dakota have passed increasingly defiant laws that go against federal policy, from immigration enforcement to gun regulation. Several governors have openly refused to cooperate with the central government on federal programs like healthcare or climate policy. Polarized media outlets have created two separate realities: one group of Americans living by Fox News, the other by MSNBC, with a bottomless gulf in between. I'm not saying a civil war is imminent, but when institutions no longer command respect, and every community clings to its own version of the truth, what holds us together? Nostradamus wrote of a Western empire torn apart by fires from the hearts of its people. Maybe it was metaphor. Maybe it was a warning we chose to ignore. Perhaps the most dangerous collapse isn't the sudden one. It's the slow unraveling, bit by bit, while everyone's too tired to care. My choice: to watch, to act, or to walk away. One afternoon, I stood on a small hill, looking out at the city center from a distance. A typical American town with a water tower, a fire station, and a flag waving outside City Hall. Everything looked peaceful, but my mind was a storm. I've seen the fractures spreading, from gun-toting protests in Michigan to quiet bank runs in California. People around me are withdrawing, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually. Their trust is gone. And I asked myself, what am I supposed to do? Just watch? Speak out? Or leave? I know I can't look away. I don't want to be someone standing on the sidelines, just ranting into a void on social media. But action, real action, what does that look like? In this country, freedom is sacred. But when that same freedom is weaponized to push everything to the brink, is it still freedom? I spoke to an old friend, a history teacher in North Carolina. She said, "America's story has always been a series of crises and choices. The answers were never simple, but Americans always had to decide, do we keep building or let it fall apart?" Her words haunted me. I thought of my parents' generation, the ones who worked endlessly, sacrificed so much, to build a future that now seems on the verge of crumbling. I can't walk away from that legacy, but I'm not naive either. I know writing a few blog posts or planting a flag on my front porch won't save a country. What I have is a mic, a pen, and a spirit that hasn't yet been swallowed by cynicism. So I choose to stay, I choose to speak, and I choose to keep asking questions, even if no one wants to hear the answers. Because if I don't do it, then who will? And if not now, then when? One nation, two realities. Where is America headed? If you live in a small town in Idaho, the news you watch each night will be vastly different from someone living in downtown Chicago. We speak the same language, drive on the same interstate highways, celebrate Thanksgiving together. But the way we understand the world feels so wildly different it's almost surreal. I used to think of America simply as a diverse nation, but now I see it clearly. We're living in two parallel realities, each with its own media ecosystem, its own values, even its own version of the truth. One side believes the government is crumbling from within, manipulated by elites and AI tech giants. They talk about states needing to secede to protect freedom. The other side fears extremist populism, political violence, and the erosion of faith in the rule of law. No one listens to each other. No one trusts each other. No one is willing to back down. I think back to a conversation I had with my grandfather, a World War II veteran, who once told me that America is strongest not when it agrees, but when it knows how to disagree with respect and truth. That ability is fading. I've witnessed arguments erupt in my own town, not over taxes or roads, but over personal beliefs feeling attacked. Family dinners have turned tense. Old friends have stopped speaking after one Facebook post. We're not just losing faith in the government. We're losing faith in each other. And the question I keep coming back to is, if America falls apart, will it be because of outside forces, or because we gave up on one another? I don't have a clear answer, but I do know this: if we keep living in two separate realities, a reckoning is inevitable. It won't come with cannons like in the old Civil War. It'll come quietly, bit by bit, until there's nothing left to hold on to. Awakening. What can still save America? I've traveled from the West Coast to the East, from abandoned neighborhoods in Detroit to impoverished farmland in Mississippi. I've listened to single mothers cry over lost benefits, and to veterans rage because they feel their country has forgotten them. I've seen America, not on a map, but in the eyes and voices of ordinary people. And I've realized, America isn't threatened by some ancient prophecy. It won't fall because of AI or media or some secret global elite. America will fall when Americans stop believing in one another. The question isn't, will we break apart? The real question is, do we still have the courage to truly listen to each other? I remember meeting an old man in South Carolina, sun-leathered skin, wearing a weathered cap with the American flag stitched into it. I asked him what he thought about the future of this country. He shrugged and said, "I don't care who you vote for. I just want to know. Would you come help fix your neighbor's roof in the middle of a storm?" That answer stopped me cold, because it was simple and true. Maybe what saves America won't be a sweeping new law or a historic election, but the small things, a real conversation, an unexpected act of kindness, or the moment we choose to listen instead of judge. We don't have to agree with each other, but we do have to believe that others are also trying to do what they think is right. As I write this, I know I'm just an ordinary citizen, not a scholar, not a politician. But I still believe in the American dream. Not because it's perfect, but because we still have a chance to rebuild from the ruins if we start now.